International Women's Day, everyone. My name is Nadine, and I thank every one of you for being here today, and I thank our panelists. I want to acknowledge those who came before us, particularly women and women identified, who fought against patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism. Their acts of resistance are not forgotten. The struggle is not over, and we must continue the fight for full, unencumbered freedom. Our struggles are not only connected to the past, but also to each other, here in the present and worldwide. And so it is also important to recognize the land in which we stand, Kanaka land. We need to recognize that their fight for sovereignty is a kuleana that we all share and must bear. So as we reflect on the story of Jennifer Laude, I want us to think about the history of US imperialism in Oceania and how colonialism transformed our world. How colonial violence, which is already gendered and sexualized, was used to subjugate us, particularly our women. Furthermore, I want us to think about the struggles for and limitations on sovereignty under US empire and what we can learn as we envision sovereignty here in Hawaii. So again, my name is Nadine, and I help coordinate this event. But I also want to recognize Rebecca. Where did she go? This event would not have happened without her. We also have a friend right here in the front. I apologize. This is the art building, it's not my building. And then lastly, I want to acknowledge our sponsors who helped put this event in more ways than one. They helped fund us. We also have a firm who helped us put together the panel, find speakers for us. So our sponsors include Seed, they gave us a lot of money. UH Graduate Student Organization, LGBTQ Plus Center, Ilocano Language and Literature Program, NACM Conferences, Political Science Department, American Studies Department, Ethnic Studies Department, Women's Studies Department, Center for Philippine Studies, Ethnic Studies Student Association, and Affirm Hawaii. Thank you all. So now I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists. First is Virginia Suarez. She's a labor She dedicated her first 10 years of legal labor violations and unfair practices. Landmark cases she has worked in include the Jennifer Laude case, as we saw earlier, payroll reinstatement for all union employees of Abbott Laboratories, establishment of a fully funded daycare center to help women workers at Land Bank, reinstatement of Angel University professors and employees after a 45-day strike, reinstatement and back pay for digital employees, and lobbying the Senate to investigate the slave-like treatment of workers involved in the Hanjin shipyard. She's also the executive director or chief legal counsel for Labor Advocates for Workers Services. She's the chairperson of the women's organization Pagkakaisa Kababaihan para sa Kalayaan, also known as Kaisaka. She's also the Secretary General for Kilusan para sa Pambansang Demokrasya, also known as Kilusan, and the chair of the Women's Education Committee for the Communication Workers of the Philippines. We welcome you, Tita Virgie. Our second panelist is Kim Coco Iwamoto, previously served as the commissioner at the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, and was previously elected to serve 2 terms on the Hawaii Board of Education. She was recognized as a champion of change by President Barack Obama in 2013, and in 2018, Newsweek listed her as one of the 50 need-to-know pioneers for LGBTQ rights. Thank you, Kim Coco. Our third panelist is Yvonne Mahilona. She is a core member and organizer for Affirm Hawaii chapter. She was born and raised in Nanapuli Hawaiian Homestead On the west side of Oahu, through organizing and learning theory with the firm, she's found names for her and her family's lived experiences and makes it her goal to heal herself, her family, and community through education and liberation. Clap for Iman! Our fourth panelist is Jen Jenkins. She is currently a student at the William S. Richardson School of Law, where they are co-editor-in-chief of the Asian Pacific Law and Policy Journal. Jen is also a lead advocate on several transgender rights bills that were introduced in the current legislative session. Ultimately, Jen seeks liberation for marginalized people through their work. So if we could start with Tita Virgie.
Hello. Magandang gabi sa ating lahat. Good evening to everyone. I'm honored to be here with you. To share the film, actually to share the case of Jennifer Laude. I must say first that the Philippines is replete with stories of occupation and colonization from the time of the Spanish colonization to the US colonization. Not everybody might know that the biggest US military bases outside the US territory is in the Philippines. It covers 16,000 hectares. And when the US landed in the Philippines in 1898, the very first thing that the US did was to construct the military base. And that is the biggest military base outside the US territory. They actually constructed 100 bases. And at the time when the US would colonize the Philippines, in fact, the Americans rallied against it, and it was an issue before the US Senate because the Americans then understood that, US should not colonize under another country because it has likewise gone through its own revolution. But then, William Howard Taft then said, it's not a colonization, it is a benevolent assimilation. And then when asked how many years, and then he said, maybe not in the next a year, not in the next 10 years, not even in the next 100 years. And that's what the government, the US government, calls benevolent assimilation. And since then, the Philippines has always been militarized. The militarization does not only affect our territory, it affects our politics, it affects our economy. In fact, if we will look at our natural resources, despite of the 300 years of the Spanish colonization in the Philippines, the degradation of our economy, of our resources, our natural resources, took place only, or started only during the American occupation. So that we have, the only time that the US left the Philippines was during the Japanese occupation. But immediately after the Japanese occupation, the US soldiers got back and again colonized the Philippines and immediately entered into a treaty called Mutual Defense Treaty. And then after that, finally, the people of the Philippines rejected the military bases agreement, the renewal in 1991. But then in 1992, the US would never allow really real independence of the Philippines because immediately there is this access agreement. And since then, still, the US forces would come back to the Philippines. And since then, there would always be Balikatan exercises. And in 1998, the Visiting Forces Agreement was entered into. It was questioned before the Supreme Court, but then our own Supreme Court ruled that the Visiting Forces Agreement is valid. It is an implementing rule of a 1950 Mutual Defense Treaty. I felt so disgusted because only again, I guess it's only in the Philippines that you'll have an implementing rule issued 50 years after. How can a visiting forces agreement that came 50 years after the Mutual Defense Treaty become an implementing rule of that 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty? Not satisfied with the visiting forces agreement because of the Laude case, immediately after the Laude case, we have this EDCA, or the Enhanced Defense Cooperative Agreement. So you'll see the Philippines has always been controlled by the US. And so this case, the Jennifer Laude case, is a case that is not really easy. It is so difficult because we already have the colonial mentality. That is very much present. So when I'm handling this case, I'm actually fighting the case against our own government, against the US government, even against our own community, against the Olongapo. The Olongapo, where the incident took place, that is the place where the biggest military base was constructed. So for more than 100 years, that place, Olongapo, has always been dependent. Its economy has always been dependent on the presence of the US. But what kind of economy? It has always been prostitution. It has always been that. So it's not easy to handle that case, but then for the longest time that the US soldiers was present in the Philippines, no one actually dared file a charge against the US. Why? Because immediately the US would settle. There are cases where a 6-month-old child, a vibrator was put inside the vagina of that 6-month-old child. A 6-year-old child, a 16-year-old child. There are so many cases. When the US left, we were left with all these chemicals and the number of cases of cancer because of all these chemicals left by the US. And the US never cleaned up the military base. Now, and that is where this case took place. The Pemberton was still in service at that time. It was only during his liberty time when this happened. That's why when I'm handling this case, it's a case like even the US would organize a march or a rally pro-VFA. So you'll see people marching against VFA, people rallying against VFA, but there's also this rally pro-VFA. Now, the case, it has always been a denial on the part of Pemberton. But I don't know what, the tactics of the lawyer, because they were saying it's a self-defense. They claim it is self-defense, but also they were claiming it's that there is this obfuscation or passion or obfuscation. So these two tactics are contrary, so that it will never really pass the judgment. And in the course of the trial, we actually use the NCIS evidence. No? I must say that the NCIS investigation was really good. And they found out in their own findings, in the 10 global witnesses offered by the US, they all found, the findings were all the same, that Pemberton's semen, Pemberton's fingerprints were all present in the body of Jennifer Laude, in the condom, in the room, and everywhere. In fact, even Jennifer's fingerprints were present in the body of, in the clothes of Pemberton. So that, indeed, there is no reason why we would fail in this case. The evidence was really enough to convict Pemberton. It's just that from murder, it was reduced to homicide. But the family, I must say that the family is happy with that. Somehow the family is really considerate of the fact that Pemberton is a 19-year-old. You see, Nanay is a very reasonable Nanay, and she also sees Pemberton's life after serving his sentence. One good thing about this case is that, yes, it has galvanized our nation because the case is not simply a murder case. It's not simply a homicide case. It is a case about sovereignty. It is a case about gender-based crime. It is a case about discrimination. It is a case about involving prostitution, sex trafficking. It is a case about the unequal relationship between the U.S. It's all about sovereignty. It's a case that tackles so many issues that people can easily relate to. And if you also notice, while there are so many, we're so biased about this case because no one then believed that an American soldier would finally be convicted. Because for the longest time, not one was ever charged, not one was ever incarcerated, not one was ever convicted. In fact, there were so many issues thrown against me, and even thrown against the family. Like the family was demanding money, there is this issue of about 38 million, we don't know where all this coming from. Issue of 21 million, issue that there was even a time when even I was questioned, like I am not a member of LGBT community and therefore I have no right to handle the case. And later on, when that did not at all pass, and then suddenly there is this issue that my husband discovered that I am a lesbian, and then my husband separated from me, my husband left me. So many issues being thrown against me. But all these things did not matter to me. Okay, what did I do when I handled this case? Because knowing the situation of the family is really a poor family, and knowing that they live in a Longapo, which is like a pro-American community, it will be really difficult. So I decided to live with the family. Living with the family, it was also it was difficult for me because it's a 3-hour, I would commute every day then. It's a 3-hour commute from Manila to Olongapo. I had to leave my family then. But of course, I have to explain to the family that I have to do this. I have to live with the family, to see the family, to feel the family, to understand the family, and to see really how, all the things, how the family thinks, what actually the feelings of the family, how the community feels, how the community thinks. I have to understand all these things so that I can actually prepare the case. When I handle the case, I know that it's not only legal. I have to combine it with a meta-legal, it's a legal and meta-legal combination. I have to involve the people because I believe this is a case that should involve the entire Filipino nation. That is this case, that a sovereignty issue is very much involved. And because of that, despite of the gag order, despite of the 2 gag orders, I would always report to the media. I have to bring the people to the court, and I have to bring the court to the people. And that's what I did. I have to involve the media. Our organization was very much present from the very beginning, and so what we did is we have to ensure that there would be discussion of the U.S.-Philippine relationship on the ground, in every corner. I also discussed and explained to the family what VFA is, because this will definitely come into play. I have to explain to the family the history of an equal relationship of U.S. and the Philippines. I have to explain it to them so that they would understand where the case would be going and where I am coming. It's really, that's why I would always say that it's not simply a case of homicide. Winning the case is also difficult because despite the conviction, the big issue is the custody. But I must tell you that Pemberton is serving a sentence. He is serving a sentence in a special facility inside the armed forces of the Philippines, not in the National Bilibid prison. Despite him being declared as a national prisoner, but that is only temporary because we are simply awaiting for the finality of the decision before the Supreme Court. All the appeals of Pemberton have already been dismissed before the RTC, before the Court of Appeals, and now it is before the Supreme Court. All motions for reconsiderations have likewise been dismissed in all these courts. Now we are simply awaiting for the decision of the Supreme Court. Remember, when the Court of Appeals made its decision as to the facts of the case, it is always final. There is no finality, but the findings of facts will always be considered as final because the Court of Appeals is not a trial. The Supreme Court is not a trier of facts, but the Court of Appeals is. So the findings of Court of Appeals, the findings of facts will always be considered final. So it's just a matter of time before the case will finally be considered as final and executory. And after that, Pemberton would be transferred to the National Bilibid Prison of the Philippines. Damages, not a single centavo is paid yet. No? Not a single centavo. You see also in the film that several times, that was not the only time, several times that the U.S. Embassy or the U.S. Representative of the U.S. Embassy has approached the family, trying to convince the family to finally settle and sign a waiver or make a retraction statement. I am proud and I'm happy that the family has stood firm and in fact, simply awaiting for the decision. I hope it will, I hope this case will continue to be seen by a lot of people because there's so much learning in this case. I mean, it's a story of an ordinary trans woman. It's a story of a mother losing one's child. I'd like to share this one incident during the trial. Nanay Julita simply finished grade 2, after grade 2. So grade 2 elementary. So she does not know how to speak English. She does not also understand any other language but Tagalog. But inside the court, there would be 16 U.S. soldiers inside that court. And then I would feel so intimidated. I myself felt so intimidated and harassed many times because it's like I'm not in a Philippine court because there are 16 U.S. soldiers and the representative of the Pacific Command and several people from the NCIS and several people from the U.S. Embassy. And my clients only have me, aside of course from the court staff who are all Filipinos. So it's really intimidating. It took a while before my motion to kick them out of the courtroom was approved. Finally, of course, it was approved because I said I myself is feeling intimidated and harassed, and especially my clients. When I presented Nanay to testify, understanding that Nanay does not know how to speak English, I had to file a motion for me to be allowed to conduct my direct examination in Tagalog language, in the language that is where Nanay is comfortable and Nanay understands. And when I asked Nanay, coming to, some of the lawyers here, coming to the damages part, I asked Nanay, if you are to quantify the pain and agony of losing one's child, how much would you quantify that? And Nanay faced me, and then after looking at me, she looked at the defense counsel and said, if your daughter or son is killed, how much would you want your daughter or son be paid? And the defense, that brought silence to the entire court, and not one of the defense counsel had the guts to even conduct the cross-examination to the Nanay. In fact, even the court then, I asked the court that if they are to speak then it has to be in Tagalog, because I don't care if other people do not understand, but I care a lot if Nanay understands what's happening inside the court. And that's why I have to move that she be allowed to speak in Tagalog, and that I be allowed to conduct my examination of her also in Tagalog. Prior to that, it's a battle with the defense counsel. Why? Because the defense counsel would not want me to present Nanay, and would simply want us to stipulate, and that they offered to stipulate that fact that Nanay felt sad when her daughter died. And so I said, again, I told the lawyer, so if your daughter or son would be killed, are you telling me that you would just feel sad? And I told the court, no one else, but only Nanay can ever express the pain and agony, the wide range of emotions of pain and agony that a mother feels when she loses her child. And that was the reason why I was allowed to present Nanay and to present her in the language for which she is most comfortable with. Thank you.
Next, we would like to ask Kim Coco to speak.
Actually, please, I would love to hear from you next, if that's okay.
Or Yvonne.
Aloha mai kako. Aloha. O Ivan ko'ui noa, no nana kuli mai au, no ho'au ma'ewa. My name is Yvonne, she, her, hers. I am Kanaka Maoli native Hawaiian who grew up in Kuli, on the Hawaiian homesteads. I'm one of the core organizers of Hawai'i, and we are the anti-imperialist feminist headquarters of Hawaii. Woo! Yeah. So that means we know that systems like militarism and colonization are connected to patriarchy and dependent on violence against women and women-identified people or femme-identified people. We organize to center girls and women-identified people of color, always taking into consideration the multiple systems of oppression we all live under. As people who are colonized, we aren't supposed to find our way to affirm. And I say we because I'm assuming some of you were probably like me, who was raised in a Protestant Christian military family, whether you're Filipino, Hawaiian, or another Pacific Islander. As much as my family tried to be the perfect Hawaiian American family, of course we could never be that. We could not win at their game, and every generation in my family has traumatized itself trying to do so. The small perks blinded me and my ohana to the big arms. Because my papa was a retired major in the Army, and he worked for civil defense for years and years after, we were proud. We had his retirement money, we had military discounts, yes, commissary, okay, and yes. But knowing now what I didn't know back then about the military, I can say the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. We were suffering the same way many people in our homestead were. And us being a military and Christian family didn't separate us from that. So we're talking violence, drugs, alcohol, which resulted in physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. I've seen my mom and my aunties fight my uncles when they were coming down from their highs. I knew the smell of drugs probably before I was 10 years old, that there was the separation of families because of incarceration. My friends and family taken away by CBS, financial struggles, struggling between being too Hawaiian in certain places and not enough Hawaiian in others. Our family couldn't live up to or fully assimilate to the American dream. And so that self-hate and ridicule birthed violence. We are made to be dependent on this system that hates us, that targets us to fight their wars, to displace other Native people, and reward us with financial security, VA loans, and cutting in front of people in line. It's like the more oppressive the system, the more all-encompassing, and and the more we defend it. This film connects to our life here in Hawaii so much. Our agency, our consent, our freedom under these systems is a lie. It's bigger cages and longer chains. It's not worth what you give up of yourself to survive in American systems like military or the sex trade or both. Yet we get very defensive about abolishing them because we think we are nothing without them. Like Tita Virgie said earlier, look at the community where the Laudes live. More empathetic to Pemberton because he was a US military man and they were highly dependent on the military. And look at the state of their country. Yes, they are free, but still very much colonized and imperialist. When I said earlier that we're not supposed to find our way to affirm, it's because these institutions were put in place intentionally to separate us from seeing our connections. They tried to make us forget who we were, who our ancestors were, and how they thrived. For Hawaiians, it was aloha aina. Everyone had a place and role in our society, whether you were walking in, mahu, kane, aikane. We took care of each other in the same way we take care of our land, because that is where our sustenance came from, our people and our land. All of it was a sacred familial relationship. Europeans and Americans separated us from that and brought this extreme sense of entitlement to land and women's bodies here. They flipped the script of what was sacred and precious into something disposable, only valuable in terms of how much use it had for them. Now everything sacred and precious is commodified. Foreigners' idea of Hawaii is it's a supple island paradise waiting for you with arms wide open. Their idea of our women and girls here and in the Philippines is that they are available for purchase and ready to serve them. This Western entitled attitude and disrespect is still on display all around us, from making access to our land and our resources difficult and illegal, trademarking aloha, buying up plantation homes because they're so cute, being willing to arrest Hawaiian faculty and students to erect yet another telescope atop our sacred mauna, banning ceremony and prayer atop our sacred mauna, to trying to access our women and girls' bodies for the cheapest price they can negotiate. This documentary shows what it looks like in the Philippines. Native and colonized women are nothing but fuel for their war machine, and even our own government won't fight for them. Except for here, there's the Hawaii State Commission on Statutory. So to decolonize the way you see and value us. When we say decolonize, we mean ending this mentality that women and LGBTQ folks should be sacrificed or put into these boxes and forced definitions. Decolonize the way you see and treat women, trans women, bakla, mahu,